Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 117. So glad you could join me. I don't know if you hear in the background, but if you do, I'm sorry. Our neighbor is building an addition to his house so he can have more guests. It's one of those, what's it called? Where the Airbnb. They want to have more Airbnb space. And so it's dark out now, but there's still hammering in the background. So if you hear hammering in the background, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about it. Hopefully, when it gets completely dark, he's not using a flashlight or something and continuing to finish his roof. But this is Rattlecast number 117. And our guest today is Clemonce Heard. He'll be with us in about 15 minutes. Before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry, and I know you love poetry too, so please do click the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you're watching this. And that's how things spread around the internet, and that's what we want to do. So please click something now to help us out in that regard. Now, we're going to call up today's poet. It's an interesting poem that we published today. This is the first time. I like to mix things up a little bit as much as possible and have just the most, the widest range of possibilities available for what we can do with Poets Respond. And this is the first time we've ever published a translation. And not only is it a translation, it's a translation of a poem that's almost 2,000 years old. And it's a poem that made news this week when Elon Musk tweeted it and made the whole world wonder why. And let's call up Yuemin and talk to her about her translation. Oops, hang on. Get this number again. There we go. I called the wrong number. Wait a minute. Oh. Okay, give me 1 second. So somehow we set this, we're trying to call Nigeria. That's the wrong number. Because I tried to call someone there earlier. Okay, here we go.
Hello.
Hey, this is Tim with Rattle. You are live on the Rattlecast. So glad you could join us, Yuemin.
Hi, Tim. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. It was great to share this poem. Do you want to explain a little bit about the poem's background? So the story for people who haven't seen the poem yet is that Elon Musk tweeted this poem with a sort of a cryptic message. He had the word humanity above it with a hashtag, I think, and then the original Chinese. Do you want to explain a little bit about what this poem is and what it means and why why you wanted to translate it?
The poem was written by Cao Zi, a poet who lived during the Three Kingdoms period of China. So that's somewhat like from AD 220 to 280. And Cao Zi, he reportedly said that they said those words aloud to settle a dispute with his brother Cao Pi. Cao Pi back then, he was already on the throne. He was feel like jealousy of his brother Cao Zi's talent. So he told his brother, if you cannot compose a poem about the relationship between brothers within 7 steps walking, then I'm going to kill you. But the brother did it. So that's allegedly, that's how the poem came into being. But it was recorded into a book much later. And it has been a very popular poem in China, and also children study the poem when they were in school basically it's teaching them to get along with each other. So it's allegorical in a lot of ways there. I translated it because I saw the news about Elon Musk, and I also saw a lot of people, some people write pastiche, both in Chinese and in English for various situations. It's like variations of this poem. So there's a lot of engagements, and it's very fun. And also there's also a lot of speculation about why Elon Musk did it, because he did it in such a way he doesn't read Chinese, then how he understands the meaning of the poem, and why he put the title Humanities there. So there are some speculations because of the post he did afterwards that he might be, sharing his opinion about the Dogecoin and Shiba Inu, the two kind of cryptocurrencies. They were in fight with each other, and he was also not happy with the United Nations World Food Program, asking for donations. I think he may be related to these two kind of events, but it doesn't matter what the reason. I just feel this is a very good poem with its long-lasting appeal, and this is the right moment to know about it. That's why I translated.
Yeah, it is. And the interesting thing, so when Elon tweeted it, all of his fans were trying to figure out what it meant. And so they were typing the poem into Google Translate and coming up with all these translations, which were just not poetic at all. And when I read your translation, it's a beautiful poem in the way that you wrote it. And I looked up other translations that were available too, and they don't seem to have the poetry included. I mean, it's those kind of like literal translations, but I couldn't find a translation anywhere that captured sort of the rhythm and the meter, or in the rhyme in the same way that your poem does. And in the image, I mean, it's a really good translation, I think. Has this poem been translated often?
Thank you so much for the good words. There are a lot of translations there, but I don't think I have seen a translation that is more like the official translation, that kind. Mm-hmm. I have been doing a lot of translations, especially the classical Chinese poetry, the Book of Songs. So I'm very familiar with the 4-line, 5-character poems, or 8-line poems, those type of poetical forms. They were very traditional, very frequently used poetry form in China, and also the rhyme scheme. So I was trying to make the English version and the Chinese version resonate with each other in sound. So when you read it, you feel the cadence, the same kind of cadence there. And it's pretty difficult because English language works very differently from the Chinese language, how to make the words, matching in a certain way there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you want to go ahead and read it? And if you could, in both the Chinese and in the English too.
Okay, I will read the Chinese first, then I'll read the English. 七不思，煮豆燃豆萁，豆在釜中期，本是同根生，相煎何太急。Quatrain of 7 steps. Cooking beans over a stove fire. Beans are weeping in a boiler. Beans and stalks form one root. Why should we kill each other? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's just a beautiful translation of a really, really powerful short poem. In China, this is a poem that school children are frequently taught, right? It's a very common part of the curriculum.
Right. It's like when they were in primary school, they are taught this poem because it's just about how to get along with each other, being, between siblings and between kids, yeah. And it's a beautiful poem. It's short. It's easy to remember too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful poem. I'm so glad we could have a beautiful translation to go along with it. So thanks so much for doing this for us, Yuemin.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks. Have a great night.
Listen to you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks to the readers too. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. Yes, that was Yuemin He with a translation of Quatrain of 7 Steps. And that was one thing I was wondering. I didn't know where the 7 steps came from. So the story about the duel helps illuminate the poem too. And let's go to we have about 5 minutes till we're going to move over to Clemonce Heard. And let's go back in time a little bit. This is a poem by Molly Fisk, which was from November 5th, 2018. And this is Molly's note on the poem. The violence has been increasing for years, but the New York City bike path car attack and the shootings outside Denver this week pushed me over the edge. I live in a small mountain town, but I can feel slaughter coming toward me, and it fascinates me to watch how humans fend off the truth, not me, which I don't think we can help but do, even as we're also trying to say, yes, it's me, it's us, we're in this together, what the heck do we do? I really don't know anymore, or anyone who shops at Walmart, but the line was meant to be ironic, American upper middle class, clueless, white, etc., to continue the privilege and isolationism of the first lines for effect. And that was her note. There was these shootings in Walmart at Denver, in Denver back in, here we go, this is a police capture suspect in deadly Walmart shooting in Colorado. And that was the headline from November 2nd, 2017. And this was Molly Fisk's poem, Violence Fractal. I'm going to have Molly play it for you right now.
Violence Fractal. First, it's locations you've never heard of, then faraway places you haven't been, then countries you've traveled to, but not that city and not in a long time. Slowly, a tulip unfurling red petals. It's Paris, Rio, Toronto, and Florida, where your grandmother lived, and you flew for a visit age 12. Frogs on the window screen croaking all night. Las Vegas is just one state over. So far, no one you know, but now it's people your friends can name, a daughter's, schoolmate's, psychologist mother. This week, a bike path, a Walmart in Denver, where Ellen still lives, and your favorite niece. But no one we know shops at Walmart, do they? Soon, though, it's only a question of numbers and luck. It will be someone you liked but lost touch with, a boyfriend, a roommate, then someone you love, and then you.
And that was Molly Fisk with Violence Fractal. And now we're going to go to our main guest for today. I'm going to call up Clemonce, and we'll take a quick break, and I will be back in just a moment. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. As I mentioned, this week's guest is Clemonce Heard. Clemonce was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. He is the winner of the 2020 Anhinga Robert Dana Prize, selected by Major Jackson. His poetry collection, Tragic City, which investigates the events of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, is available now from Anhinga Press. Heard's work has appeared or is forthcoming in Obsidian, the Missouri Review, a whole bunch of other magazines, including issue number 72 of Rattle. He earned a BFA in Graphic Communications from Northwestern State University and an MFA in Creative Writing from Oklahoma State. Heard was a recipient of the 2018-2019 Tulsa Artist Fellowship and was the 2019-2020 Ronald Wallace Poetry Fellow at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He currently lives in San Antonio, Texas, and serves as the Sala Diaz Artist in Residence. But right now, he's in Tulsa, and here he is, Clemonce Heard. Hey, Clemonce, how you doing?
Hey, Tim, I'm well. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you. It's just a wonderful book. Do you want to start us out with a poem?
Yeah. I'll start off with a poem titled Neighbors. It's on page 19.
Okay.
And I'll just say this is one of the first poems I wrote moving to Oklahoma when I was living in Stillwater, Oklahoma, which I'll be returning to tomorrow for a reading. Here we go. Neighbors. How long did it take to paint the flag on the garage's back wall is not what I ask. myself, or my sweetheart, backing out of the driveway, heading back to where we just turned, looking for a place to stay. We were greeted by a lawn of trucks and cars, Hot Wheels that had grown and grayed, and the Confederate mural for us to marvel. It couldn't have been that difficult, seeing as the design is rather simple. A diadem X of 13 stars, an intersection of dreams, and the red that surrounds it. The red text, the red trucks, the red necks, the red rust, pointing to the odd of it all. A single man could have pulled it off, could have brushed, or rather slathered paint from canister to wall. But 2 stories means family. So I picture a wife drafting the Southern Cross, and kids filling in the stars. Oh, say, can you see an open garage aerating the latex exhaust? Neighbors walking their children, pointing past the ropes, shovels, ladders, saws. Racism takes teamwork, takes the anointment of offsprings. I can almost see their gawking once the wall was finished. The man kissing his wife's temple, both with one arm around each other and the other around their kids. That day, my sweetheart and I agreed the mounds of the Midwest were no place we want to live. I guess the image could have existed in the house before they got to town. A backdrop whistling, "Welcome, niggers," they'd failed to take down.
And that was Neighbors from Tragic City, Clemonce's newest book. I want to talk about a lot about the book, but let's start out just talking about your background and how you came to become a poet. Do you remember like the first poem you wrote, or like what drew you to poetry in the first place?
Yeah, I can remember the first poem. The first poem I remember was in, I want to say, 9th grade. It was for a girl, and she didn't like me at all. And my teacher asked me in class if I could read it, because my teacher enjoyed the poem so much, and I read it, and the girl who was in that class was like beating her head against the desk as I read the poem. And so that's the first affirmation that I received, and the first time I remember writing a poem. So yeah.
What was it about, that process of writing the poem and sharing it that drew you to it and made you want to keep going?
That didn't come until, because I stopped writing. That didn't come until undergrad. That came when a friend asked me to write for an open mic that he was doing. He was hustling, and he was like, "Yeah, man, I got this thing going at this bar, and looking for poets. Can you write? Do you write?" And I said, "I think I can remember how to write, But it was, I think, like most poets or most writers, we want to communicate. We want to be heard, and so that was a place where people listen. People listened to me, which I wasn't used to in my home when I was younger, and so to have a space where people were listening,
Yeah,
just kept going.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, so you didn't have much, poetry, growing up. It wasn't something that you were participated in at all, or reading. Did you read a lot of novels and things like that?
My mom would try to shove stuff in my face. I loved comic books when I was younger, and she would buy them, so I would read them. But I just wanted them for the pictures. But no, I joke about this now, but I failed English in high school.
Really?
And so I joke about it now, but back then I wasn't interested. I wasn't interested in what was being taught in the classrooms. And I think I had at least two, no, even three excellent English teachers. But still in all, I know I wasn't interested in that stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting that it sort of sparked later. So about this book, it's about the Tulsa Race Massacre, and it's an incident in American history which is well known now, but only all of a sudden. For the longest time, it was just hidden, and people didn't even talk about it. I was looking up the Wikipedia page about it, and they mentioned that, like in those, like on this day in history in the Tulsa newspaper, they never mentioned it until really recently. And even in the what is it, the firemen's like 100-year anniversary thing for the Tulsa police thing, it was the whole town, the whole Greenwood burned down And they don't even mention it in the history of the fire department there. So it's something that like, and I hadn't learned, maybe like 10 years ago or so, it started to get on the radar of people. But before that, it was just this like, silent history that no one ever talked about or shared. When did you learn about it? And was it, because I know you grew up in New Orleans, was that something that brought you to Tulsa? Did you want to write about this, or did you find out about it afterward? When did you learn about this, and when did you decide to start writing about it?
Yeah, I appreciate that question so much, Tim. I learned about it. I was in school at Oklahoma State. I was getting, my master's in creative writing, and I ended up getting a fellowship in Tulsa. And so I said, okay, well, I know I'll move there. And so I want to say I learned about it either right before I moved or right after I moved. But I have two friends, or one's living in Tulsa now, and they showed me the ropes. They told me about the history, because when I was living in Tulsa, I was living on one of the battlegrounds of the massacre. I just didn't know it. The fellowship didn't inform us that, where we were. And so to answer your question, if I wanted to write about it, no. I had another manuscript just from grad school that was done, and I was sending out, and it was getting rejected left and right. And I'm glad now, I'm glad it was getting rejected. But no, I had no intention on writing about the massacre. I probably had maybe 3 poems that I had written that were one about, matter of fact, they weren't even about the massacre. They were just about Oklahoma. And then, later on, I decided, once I found myself in it, because I was living in Tulsa, once I found myself in the poems, that was when I decided. But that was after, or right before. It was right before I left Tulsa in late 2019. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one thing I love, there's a long a preface or foreword, or whatever we call it, that you wrote about standing on your balcony for that fellowship, right above the scene where a lot of these things happened. And it really, I love that introduction.
Thank you.
Do you want to just, maybe for people who might not be familiar with it, do you want to describe what happened and just the history of it?
Yeah, I could I'll give a short. So really what happened was what was going to happen either way, because with that many affluent black people in one district and that many poor white people in the district, it was bound to happen. But they pinned everything on this guy named Dick Rowland, who in an elevator one day bumped into this young woman named Sarah Page. She screamed, he ran out of the elevator, and then they went after him, and then going after him, a lot of other stuff happened in between. I won't tell the whole story just because this stuff can be looked up, but what I will say is they ended up massacring the people of Greenwood. To this day, I don't know how many people were killed, and they burned the majority of Greenwood down. And so that's the brief history. But like I said, like this stuff is all online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem. What do you want to read next?
Well, since we're on it, I think this will give more of it, since we're talking about like really what happened. So I'm going to read Genius Annotations Provided, You Dropped a Bomb on Me. It's on page 4. And this is a poem after the Gap Band's You Dropped a Bomb on Me, which after I moved to Tulsa and learned of the massacre, that song had a totally different meaning to me. Here we go. Genius Annotations Provided, You Dropped a Bomb on Me. If this funk hit isn't reminiscent of the massacre, with its whistling of the scent and combustible drum rolls, then the trio's bedazzled camouflage and 2-bit bombers gilding the video will surely make witnesses feel like they've marched back in time. Since I told the woman whose hair is a waft of smoke I have a crush on her, it's something I've been trying to define. What it means to see an interest one has or still desires from a distance, and what it means to subdue, oppress, gentrify. Sometimes I ask white folks working at gutted warehouses turned bookstores, restaurants, breweries, where they stand. Most of them grin, assimilationists. Others squint, race doesn't exist. Rarely do they realize I'm referencing the land. The line, you lit the fuse, I stand accused, may refer to Dick Rowland, a.k.a. Diamond Dick, allegedly running from the elevator and its young white operator like a swift burning wick, a manic flame, like a man escaping a blame not his own. On the way to get away, my crush and I made out two white women taking pics of a brick shell that was once a business. When she told me I see this all the time on this side of the tracks, I wondered why some find ruination so captivating. It hasn't been 5 months, but the structure across from my apartment is nearly done. When I told one of my friends it feels like I'm sleeping outside, even on Saturdays, he replied, they must be trying to get it up before the Lord descends. You Are the First explosion may also refer to a bomb or a mob lighting a house on fire and the corrosion that follows. Many Black homes had gas lines. Many Black homes caught fire just by sitting beside or behind one another. The one time my crush who drives a carriage and I dance wasn't a riot, but an unsynchronized bopping and spinning. We could see the pastime stadium from where we clung. Its lit green field vast enough to house over 10,000 tenants. A constructive way to reimagine an afterthought is to name it spontaneity, something planned or unplanned that to the privileged sounds like a good idea. Similar to Crush, I'm digging this from the rubble, along with, of course, the town favorite, reconciliation. To be turned on is to be aroused. To be turned on is to be activated. To be turned on is to be attacked. Likewise, to be turned out is to be whipped. To be turned out is to be banished. And a turnout signifies who showed up for fanfare and who for warfare. When the women whose skin tags resemble bits of ash or charcoal told me she had reservations about our relationship, I tromped to the tracks, bendo sack in hand, ready to go. I waited for her far-off figure or a train to jump, but neither showed. Even if they don't claim one another, we all know envy and invasion are cousins. To say the raids had no relation to Black Tulsa's affluent community is like saying oil cannot be set ablaze, like saying there were no families that shared the same graves. The in won't forget it, warbled by a woman of mystery, is meant to simulate the pain of repeatedly burning oneself, the sight of the leech-like blister when it swells, and the scar neither time nor suppression can efface. I'm now wise enough to know sentiments conveyed prematurely can trigger a type of pain. When I hear post-racial country, my instinct is to hiss or suck air through my teeth. When I think of the warmth I divulged, I shake my skull in disbelief of its stake. Yet another Juneteenth dampened by sprinklers of fireworks, a raucous ruckus of rockets launched from the baseball field where Blacks were driven out. I'm not sure what's more traumatic, the echoes of gunfire or the blood-tinted clouds. The caesura between bomb on me and baby always gets me. Separator of action and actor, comma not a come on, but an accent to the tender tension of making your feelings known to the person who's done you wrong, but also loved you right. Sarah Page, the white elevator operator, is said to have screamed after Roland stepped on her toe, or after he tripped into her, or after a quarrel. The latter may point to the potential romantic affair unanimously rejected by the shaft, carriage, and rope. Though bridges are historically used to bring together, like train tracks, they are also dividers. I knew once I started north from my enamorada, I had become an outsider. I knew that once I hiked under the overpass, there was no coming back. On warm nights, I can hear the tank car shriek past like a woman who's lost everything. The tankards of L pedal down Archer Street and the prayers of passers-by. When I can't fall asleep, I kneel at my window, wait for the plain dress mobs to arrive. After the massacre, city ordinances prohibited blacks from rebuilding their homes. They spent months in tents the color of bandages covering too substantial of a wound still refusing to heal, a wound nearly a century has failed to air out.
And that was Genius Annotations provided You Dropped a Bomb on Me from Tragic City. And so what is the, like you mentioned in the first poem, that Confederate flag when you first moved to the area. What is the awareness now of it? You know, over these last, 10 years, it seems like it must have increased. And I think I read that Oklahoma is making it mandatory to be taught in the schools now too. Is there more of a sense of that people know what's going on? And is there any kind of like, I don't know, any kind of like attempts at atonement or anything going on to sort of heal the wounds at all?
There are attempts, yeah, definitely. What I'll say about the Confederate flag is that was in Stillwater, and so, but in Tulsa, I just saw them unveil this monument on Archer and MLK, which is the boundary. It's one of the boundaries of where black businesses were at the time, where Greenwood, was cut off. The residential areas stopped a block before that, but they have a monument that's being, put up now. What I would say is, my opinion, is it like, and I think I share this with many people, is it proper atonement? I don't believe so. I haven't seen, the mayor, or I haven't seen them reaching to give reparations to the three known survivors, that are still here. So, no, I don't think it's proper atonement. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done, but I also think that so much of the area has already been claimed. Mm-hmm. And so much of, because it is, it's the acre and massacre, right? It's just, it's all of it was a land grab, all of it was transformed afterwards. So I don't think there's proper atonement, but there are things being done.
Yeah. The one thing I didn't know that I'd read just now today is that there are actually, at least reports, I don't know if it's confirmed, that people were flying airplanes over and dropping bombs actually, and that's why. If you look at the pictures, and I encourage everybody to do so, just on Wikipedia or whatever, it looks like Hiroshima or something. I mean, there's like, just the stumps of trees and chimneys. I mean, it looks like a disaster area. It's not just a massacre, but it's like a war that went on that evicted people from that land. And it's just shocking, and it seems like all about all the things that we talk about today with the institutionalization of racism and all the wealth that was destroyed on that day, which would have been accumulating over the 100 years since. Like how many wealthy black families would there be in that area if they were left to prosper? And then the fact that happened, not just in Tulsa, but in so many different cities, and cities in Arkansas and in Louisiana and in Florida, there are similar events that happened. So it's such a huge event in the history, and it's at least good to air it out and let people know about it, and hopefully do something to correct all that injustice.
Yeah, you got it, Tim, and that is the thing, right? That is the question of like, where would Greenwood be if Greenwood still existed? Because right now Greenwood is considered North Tulsa. There's one block of Greenwood, and there's some things happening around that block. But yeah, with the Stratford Hotel, would that be as big as the Marriott? Would that be as big as the Marriott or the Hyatt or the Hilton or whatever? And so, those are questions that we'll just theorize. We'll say, yeah, we believe it. They would be. And even if they didn't, it would still be here. Those structures would still be here. But what you're saying about the planes are totally accurate. And those planes they're in the Gap Band's video, that music video for You Dropped a Bomb on Me. Mm. You have these, I don't know what they're called, 2-bit kind of video, those old graphics, and it's just flying over. And yeah, which is why when I saw the video, I was like, oh, okay, this has to be about the massacre. But Charlie Wilson confirmed maybe a few months ago, he said, no, I didn't write that song, about the massacre. He knew about it, but he didn't write it. And my thing is, I was kind of smacking my lips. Maybe he didn't have that intention. Yeah. But if you know the story, if that's already in you, then I'm thinking unconsciously he is,
Yeah.
doing
Well,
this
it's
stuff.
amazing always what comes out of the subconscious anyway. Like that's kind of what art is pulling out things that you know but you don't know or they're on the surface of your awareness. And so
Mhm.
so knowing those details, and then that's just the beautiful thing about creativity, is that they come out in ways that you don't expect at all, which is what I just love about what we do with poems. If anybody has any questions for Clemonce, let me know in the chat windows on Facebook or Twitter, and I will pass them. Or not Facebook or Twitter, Facebook or YouTube. Don't ask me anything on Twitter because I can't watch too many screens at once. But Facebook or YouTube, ask a question, I will pass it along. Let's hear another poem.
Yeah, well, we were just talking about the plane, so we'll stay there. And I'll go to a poem on page 78 titled Pesticide is to Chigger as Turpentine is to, and then there are 9 blanks. Or you can read it as 1 blank. All right, here we go. As kids, he said, me and my brothers waved flags at the edge of fields to guide our father's crop duster. We couldn't hear for the propeller and squinted whenever the pesticides misted our surrender. Disgusting, right? We were insane. We were podunk country bumpkins filled with a pride white as rice, stubborn as the brink of grain. Our mother was bright enough to stay inside, to cook what we raised, harvested, and eventually herded for slaughter. The toxins burned when they fell on our skin, and burned when water doused our spires. The worst part was rinsing the fire from our hides. Mine felt like it glowed in the dark.
Yeah, another powerful poem that was pesticide is to chigger as turpentine is to blank. And I want to talk a little about your writing style, because there's a very like collage kind of feel to this book. I don't know if you always do that or if it's something you deploy just based on the subject matter, but there's a way that like you move through different scenes and different speakers, and there's sort of this like blurring of lines between who is saying what and through time and space. There's sort of this like fading in and out of scenes effect or something. And is that something that you always do in your poems, or is this something that you deployed on purpose for this book in particular?
I'm interested if you give me an example, because that's new to me, Tim.
Just like poem to poem, it feels like we move back, back in time, and we see through the eyes of people that were, things that were taking place then and things that were taking place now. And there are these movements within the poems between stanzas. I don't know if I could pull up an example, but a lot of the poems have those kind of movements. And there's a way that there's like a freedom of I feel like a lot of movement in the poems, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So is that something that you do intentionally, like all the time, or is that something that comes out in revision? Like, do you have longer poems that you splice together like this? Like, how does your writing process work?
Now I can answer that one.
Okay.
What I can say about that is conscious, in terms of I am trying to move. I'm trying to fold time is what I'm really trying to do, and it's specific with this book, specifically with the massacre, because the whole time I was writing this book, when I first began, it was just I was kind of retelling history, and I read some books, poetry, some prose, where it was just a retelling. And I'm so much more interested in imagination, and I'm interested in like, well, how do we fill in these gaps? And so my thing was like, well, maybe if we can try to bridge that, we could try to like, create this bridge of time. And then, so maybe I think that's as close as I can get in terms of answering like the different voices, or, I am trying to move, from one time to the next, and mainly because all of this stuff is still going on. The same, the same type of, the same people who were downtrodden then, the same, it's still happening now here in Tulsa. And so I wanted to kind of have that parallel of like, yeah, I mean, time has passed, but, not much has changed for the better of Greenwood. Let's say that, for the better of Greenwood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And did you sort of imagine yourself in like back in time? Is that part of your process for writing? Was that like walking through the streets of Tulsa now? Were you thinking of yourself being there in 1921?
I imagine that when I looked out of my window, and that's the only instance I can think of right now. I'm sure, reading those books, I was putting myself there, like reading all the books that I read, all the research, and listening to the testimonies. But what I can think about now is, like I said, my window was facing the Frisco Railroad tracks, where one of the worst battles took place. And so one of the most violent battles took place. And so that was a time where, yeah, I mean, I was imagining myself mainly because, I could project myself, straight out of my window onto the tracks. But yeah.
So what is your writing process like? Like, how do you, if you sit down and you say, I want to write a poem, how does that poem come about? Do you have any kind of like regular process to it, or is it different every time?
Most of the time it's sound. Most of the times I hear sounds. But what I'll say is, however it begins, it usually begins with trying to fill a gap. With this book specifically, I'm trying to fill a gap. It has to be something that's, that feels new. Something that feels new. If it's a sound, if it's some strong sounds starting with it, I'm just trying to thread those sounds throughout the entire piece. But my writing process is usually writing in one huff. I just want to get it all down, and I'm writing as fast as I can. I'm not trying to control anything on that first go. And then, so the draft and then the revisionist comes in the room and, gets to work, starts, it starts to do the work. I think there are a few poems that are different. I think that one poem I think I'll read later, the Parasol Food poem. Well, I did. I wrote that poem and it was like 2,500 words. And then it shrunk into a sonnet because I said, well, I'm just going to take these song titles. I was trying to honor Hal Singer, Hal Cornbread Singer, who's a pretty famous saxophone player who moved to France years and years ago. But yeah, I mean, he was huge, and at the time when I was first writing it, he was still alive. He passed away last year at 100. And but yeah, I mean, most poems I call it spin writing. I'm just trying to kind of like spin bikes, right? I'm just trying to like stay on. I'm just trying to go until and really write past an ending. And I think I learned that from Yusef Komayaka, him saying like, poets usually write past the most provocative moment in a poem. And so him saying he edits from the bottom up. Yeah. And so that's usually like what I'm trying to get to. I don't want to know what the ending is. I just want to know what the beginning is and go through.
Yeah. That's almost the only, when we revise submissions for people, we'll say, well, publish this, but you got to cut the last stanza there or the last two or whatever. The real ending is here. Is probably at least several poems in each issue have that, because we do tend to do that. The one thing I was thinking though is thinking about your process, and I saw that you're a cook too, and you have a lot of food type based poems, and I was wondering if there like some kind of parallel metaphor there with cooking, because when it's almost like you are like making a finished product gradually step by step as you're writing a poem, and like adding the right ingredients at the right time is kind of important too. Do you think of it like that, and do you think like your cooking has anything to do with writing poetry?
Yeah, I think so. And I just recently thought of this, Tim. I mean, you're asking all the questions I want to answer. You could talk about food all day, and I'm on board. But yeah, I mean, I thought about how I was talking about this earlier. How the jobs I've had cooking, I cooked for about 7 years in the restaurant industry, and every job was you learn the menu, right, and then eventually you memorize the menu, and you're good, right? You can move. And so the same thing is with poetry for me, is where, okay, I just need to learn the forms. I need to learn the techniques. I need to learn all of this stuff. And I need to have it by heart. And that way, when I'm writing and I see, oh, this poem wants to be a villanelle, it wants to be a sonnet, whatever the case may be, I can just keep writing. I don't have to stop and look back and say, what's a sonnet? What's a villanelle? And so I think cooking in that way, and the urgency is really the thing that I go for. Like if I can, there has to be urgency at cooking because we have to get it out at a certain time. And the moment you feel like you have to think about something is the moment where you get behind. That's the moment where something's going to be late. And so I think about poems in the same way of like, let me just have that urgency. Let me just know what my twos are and let me just use it. And when I am doing that, it usually comes out to be at least a good practice, because that's how I look at every poem. At least it's a good practice. I may not revise it even, but like just the draft, just being like, okay, I discovered something, and maybe I'll go back to it. But yeah, so cooking and poetry, they definitely pull from one another.
Yeah, the other thing I only just thought of this as you were talking, but it's also when you're cooking, it's usually to give to someone else,
Mm-hmm.
You're cooking for your family, or you're cooking for a friend who's coming over for dinner or whatever, or you're cooking for a patron at the restaurant too. And so there's this act of like writing and making this creation and then giving it to somebody else. Is that something that you think about as you're writing a poem too, about like who you're going to be giving this insight to, or is it more just the process that you're focused on?
That's a good question. I'm thinking about, I think about the public when I'm writing, but there's poems like Rawhide, which is dedicated to my friend Hyde. And so yeah, there are certain things that make that poem public. There are certain allusions like to Frank, you see Frank Ocean, he's a well-known figure. And so that's automatically a type of entrance. And so I'm thinking like, yeah, the audience could be in on that. But a lot of the other stuff, it's just between me and him. That's a much more personal poem. But I think that there are enough things that are known. There are enough allusions where it's like, okay, I'm not too far off, and everything else, it's like, well, y'all can just feel. You can feel the energy of it. You can feel, the love, the affection in it, and so, yeah.
So there's a timely question based on the conversation here. Morgan Mayer Jokimson says, there are many different forms in the book. How do you think about different forms for different poems when you choose to use form? What the work is that you see form doing. So you just brought up the different kind of forms that you deploy, but how do you choose and how do you how do they work? Like, why a certain form for a certain poem?
Yeah. Why a certain form? That's a great question. Thank you, Morgan Mayer Jacobson is the name. Hey Faye. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think. I mean, with a sonnet, again, we talking about like affection. Again, I think, if I'm writing a sonnet, there's usually some form of affection that's happening there. But in terms of what I want the poem to do, let's say there is let me think about like the villanelle being a form of obsession. I love the villanelle. And so if I'm writing about something that I'm obsessing about, or a subject that I feel is obsessive, that fits the villanelle, right? And I think like there's a sestina in the book for a friend. And so I think about the sestina as being, well, I said this before on something else where I was talking about the sestina as being so many opportunities to be courageous with the same words, right? Or you can just flip them however you want. And so, but I see the sestina as a lot of freedom. You have just so much room. It's so big as opposed to being frightening because there's all that room. It's more so of like, how much furniture can I put, in here? And so that's what I think about with form. It just depends on the form. But a lot of times it depends on when I start to type, because I write longhand, when I start to type, what's coming out. And then that first 3 lines or first 4 lines will usually tell me, like, it'll usually say, hey, because I'm usually fitting the form. I don't always write form in the beginning. That villanelle was definitely a form, which I'll also read if we have enough time. But yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Faye.
Yeah, why don't we read another poem?
Okay, I'll read that poem, and then maybe I'll have time for maybe another short one. So this is on page 61, and this is Tulsa searches for SAS graves, and that SAS is a typo that CNN did on one of their, on something that one of their reportings of the mass graves, and trying to keep up with that, and which that's a whole nother story. Y'all can look that one up too.
I have to admit, as an editor, I read that and I said, oh shoot, I hope that's not a typo. And I checked the table of contents to make sure it was intentional, because I would have felt bad for you. But I'm glad.
Yeah, I felt bad for CNN. I would have. Yeah.
Well, they're just, I don't know. Anyway.
It gave me the poem, so. All right. Tulsa searches for SAS graves is the headline. But when you click your tongue, a dog will come running from behind the tombstone labeled Dick. But not the Dick you're not thinking, or willing to bring you to a page where mum's the head word. Though when you lick your thumb, there is no page to flick over. Only the head of a bongo drum behind the tombstone labeled Double Decker, which is huge when you realize just how much cheese you can fit on a Ouija board or rum to the head. But link up with your click and you'll see you have help in the deck of tarot that appears as soon as you slump behind the hewn stone shaped like a dock, where there lies only goose shit and a duck whose quack mirrors the cackle of a chum, and the headline you dared not to click, who isn't beneath the tombstone labeled Dick.
And that was Tulsa searches for SAS graves from Tragic City. And another thing I wanted to bring up before is you have this thing which I don't see very often, where you already mentioned it in the interview with the massacre and acre, the acre that's in the massacre. And you do that with a lot of words. I'm trying to think of like some other examples, but but throughout the book, there are a lot of those things where, and then as you're reading the poem, there's just thought like, I didn't notice. I never in my entire life noticed that word was inside that word. You put a slash through so you can see both words at the same time. And that feels like it relates to this way that the book is sort of collage-ish or something. It's like there's like something beneath the surface of everything that we're not acknowledging maybe. And then we're acknowledging it now through the book. Can you just talk a little bit about that technique and how you came up with it and why, and what you're thinking as you do that?
Yeah, thank you. So that's not my technique. That's Ether's Night. Uh-huh. That's all Ether's Night. And so I took it and really so the Genius Annotations provided that poem is a Pechacucha, which is a form that's adopted from presentations by Terrence Hayes. And I wrote a second Pechacucha, which was after their poem Outstanding. And I was really it wasn't even a Pechacucha. It was supposed to be 15 stanzas, and it was supposed to correlate to when you add up Genius Annotations provided, and then you add Outstanding, they were supposed to, be 35 and represent the 35 blocks that were burned in Greenwood. And so my whole thing was like numerology and but it just didn't work. Like I wrote probably like 60 stanzas and it just, maybe 5 were good. And I said, you know what, I'm just not going to do it. But in that poem is when I can remember messing with the word massacre, mass acre. And I had that thing going. I think there are a few other poems. I think Neighbors, it appears, and I think Reflections on Reflections of L. Lisitsky, that it appears, and maybe The Light Bulb Room, the Ralph Ellison poem, it appears. But it's like I can't help myself, but I can't help but see that stuff, and I'm always looking for as many meanings as possible. And so in Reflections on Reflections of L. Lisitsky, someone recently mentioned that, that poem, you're doing line breaks, but you're not, but it's a prose poem with the slashes. And he was the first person to say, I was like, yeah, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly what's going on. No one else has said that yet. But I'm just trying to get, like, with a line break, I'm just trying to get as many meanings there as possible, specifically if the meanings make sense to the poem. If they don't, then don't, forget the slash. But if they do, then it's like, okay, that's what I want to exist, because that's what's happening in Tulsa. It's like, how do we unearth this stuff, because so much of it has been buried.
Yeah, and that's the title too is sort of similar like that, because it's Tragic City, and Tulsa's one of its nicknames, I guess, is Magic City. And so in my mind, as I look at the book, I almost see like Magic City dissolving into Tragic City. Like if you could write like a motion cover, it would almost be like that, So here's a really good question from Anita Larrick. She asks, how do you control your natural reaction in order to create a poem rather than a political diatribe? And that's a big issue these days, because it feels like just in the last 10 or maybe 15, probably 10 years, it used to be like we didn't really touch politics much in poetry. It was rare when you got a political poem. And when I started the Poet Response series that we do, one of the reasons is that at the time, I guess it was only 8 years ago, I thought, hey, poetry should be participating in politics. Slam poetry did forever. But literary journals and literary presses didn't really have a whole lot of overtly political poems. And it was sort of almost frowned upon. And now there's just this proliferation of politics within poetry. But there's that problem that Anita mentions here, where it becomes just like a polemic for a certain position and not like a creation of art. You know what I mean? So how do you resist that? Because I think I was talking to Troy Jollymore, I think, and he says he didn't like it, and this was like 10 years ago, but he said he didn't like political poems because it was just saying, our values are good values, and don't you agree with me? Is basically what political poems are often saying, and it's a trap to avoid, because if you want to do both the work of creativity and the work of making change, you have to like make it transformative in some way. So how do you approach all that?
I have so many opinions on that. What I'll say is, I think, overtly political poems, they have their place. And I respect anyone who can write an overtly political poem and it lands, because that's then the challenge. Like, if, don't write it, and it's like you were saying, slam poetry, and all that stuff comes from, the Black Arts Movement, and, looking at Amiri Baraka, somebody who I'm thinking about, but I don't know, like, but if you listen to America, you read, somebody blew up America. Like if you read that stuff, it's good work, and it's good because, not because it's not because he's showing you so many facets, right? But it's good because he's just such an excellent writer. Whereas I am like, my personality is more so of, yeah, I see, yeah, this is wrong, but I'm also trying to see, like, well, what's on this other side? What is on this other side? Kind of like a benefit of the doubt, in a way. But I can still say, like, I can still say, like, no, I can critique it and I can say, nah, this is wrong. But I could also, like, dig a little bit deeper into it and try to figure some of that wrongness out. And I think that's just what I try to do in my life, because when I'm writing, I'm not thinking about that stuff. I'm just writing. And so I think a lot of what comes out is just, it's just our personalities coming out. And so, it's kind of like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, and it's kind of like, well, whatever's in our personality, whatever's in us is going to come out. And that's not to say that some of the poems I've written, I'm like, yes, it's all right. And even where I am now, like, I'm looking back and I'm like, yeah, me 6 months ago, me a year ago, I'm not agreeing with it, but that's why we have revision. And so that's what I'm just going to keep doing.
Yeah. Well, I lost track of how many poems we've done so far, but let's do another poem to make sure that we do a good number of them.
All right, I'm gonna do a short one because I felt like, the Genius Annotation Provided poem, it stretches, it takes up the whole couch. So I'll do this poem, which is just it's really a list of a whole bunch of songs Hell Cornbread Singer did. So I'll do this in honor of him, since there's a series of poems honoring the survivors or then survivors of the Tulsa Massacre. So this is titled Paris Soul Food.
On what page?
And this is page 92. Okay. Beef stew, neck bones, jungle juice, good to me. I thought about you, fancy pants, blue stomping Kansas City. For all we know, there is no greater love, dear one. Hey, Jude, I'm still with you. Du Bois, Lena, one for Willie, Nancy with the laughing face, Malcolm X. Brother, I'm with you on the trail with a song in my heart. Sing a song. Blues for hell, solitude, hometown. I can't get started. You don't move me. Fa, 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 fa. I can't explain my love to you. You don't know what love is. I have no more trust in justice.
It's a great list poem that is Paris Soul Food after Hale Cornbread. And there's one thing I wanted to ask about, just because you came from open mics and things like that, and the performance aspect, and then you've sort of moved to writing for the page more, I guess you could say, or I don't even know if that's true, but you're putting out books. How do you negotiate between the two? Like if you started out like writing to try to like connect with an audience, how is that different from connecting with a reader on the page? And do you do anything differently to change the way that you approach a poem because of it?
That's a good question. Patricia Smith would be trying to fight right now, because she does not believe in there's a difference between the page and the stage and the page. And even though I would say like she's the first poet that I've seen, that I was following, and I saw like, oh, okay, she's doing both. Tyemba Jess was talking about that not that long ago. So what I'll say is, I think the moment, so yeah, I mean, I think we can't see lines, right? So when someone's on the stage, we can't see the lines. But since that's the first way that I'm writing, it becomes like the stage and page fuse whenever I read it out loud. So that's when I'm thinking about, what is it going to sound like? I heard Francine J. Harris talk about this on one of the podcasts, and she was saying, yeah, like it's just, I know it's done, even though it's messy or it's whatever, because I like to read it. I like how it sounds whenever I read it. And that's what I think, spoken word and slam, like you have to, if you don't like to read it, especially if you're doing slam, you won't memorize it. Like I learned that the few times I did slam, it was just like, I can memorize it if I really enjoy it. That's how I'll know it. And if I don't, then it's just gonna slip. I'm gonna get up there and I'm gonna be that guy that's just like, and I'll say a few more words and just walk off knowing that I forgot the last minute and a half. So yeah, I think as soon as I read the lines, that's when it's like, okay, I know it's ready for both.
Mm-hmm. Did you do a lot of slam? Did you perform in competitions and things?
Uh, a little bit. So yeah, after undergrad, I moved to Baton Rouge, and there's this group called Eclectic Truth where they're ferocious. They're in it. Like you go there and you better come with your A game because they're just coming every week with it. And so, but it was my place. I never won a slam. Let me just say that. I think the closest I came, I may have gotten second place, and that was debatable. But when I was doing that, it was my challenge was I don't know I'm not going to beat these people. Like they were just too nice. I was like, I don't have it. Like I don't have that. Whatever it takes. Like and if I do have it, I hadn't found it, and I didn't give myself the time to find it. But my thing was like, if I could just write a new poem and try to memorize a new poem every week, which I didn't, I wasn't able to do that, but I was trying to write and memorize every week. And so I just kind of took it as a challenge. And that's what I see. One of the best things about slam is like, if you want to see some writers that are sharp and they're really pushing themselves, go to a slam.
Mm-hmm.
If they and some writers will say the same poem every week, especially if they're just trying to win. They're like, I know this is hot. But then there are the writers who are like, I'm trying to test my pen. I'm trying to get better. And so, yeah, I did slam for a little bit. And then after a while, I was like, okay, but I think I want to do something else too. I want to learn how to do this page, because my line breaks were wiggity whack. And so I had to, I had to.
So what would you say that you learned from that experience that you can translate into the page when it's, somebody that you're not performing it for? Are there any insights that gave you into the writing?
Let me think about insights. I don't know about insights. Maybe I would say that I was more interested in subtlety. And so I like to, I don't know. There was something about the page where it was like, I could be a little bit more subtle here. I could do some things that I just can't show on the stage, and that only people will see, like the slashes, right? There are just certain things that you'll only see on the page. And but in terms of what I took away from slam, it was really a competitive nature, but mostly with myself. It was like, because I knew I couldn't. I knew Zero Skidmore, Desiree, like Donnie Rose. I knew I wasn't beating them. I was like, I'm not even going to even try to get there, because it's just not my personality. Like even just my entire, just being seen up there. I won't say that I'm as nervous as I used to be, but the page, I'm definitely braver. And so it did teach me a type of bravery. It taught me how to hit the page differently. And then all of the poets there, they taught me, whether it was through them performing or it was just talking to them afterwards, all of them are teachers. And I think some of the best teachers I've met, have been in slams.
Mm-hmm. Would you say you learned more there than in, in the MFA kind of stuff?
I learned differently. I just, I won't say I learned more there. I would say that it was just a different type of learning. Academia is, it's tough, and I think the only way I was able to do grad school was the fact that I just wanted to learn how to write so badly. And, the woman I was dating at the time was like, you write way too much. You need to go to grad school. She was like, you got to go. And she was in grad school. And so she pushed me there. And, yes, I won't say I learned more in either space. I'll say that they just taught me different things, and I was fortunate enough to be to be on both sides and be able to say, let's figure out how to fuse them. And I think for the most part, most poems that I at least published, I've done that. Some not so much, but for the most part.
Do you have any interest in teaching? You don't teach now, do you?
I do.
Oh,
I just started,
okay.
and I taught in grad school. I taught before grad school. I was teaching when I worked for Apple. I was an instructor there, and so I've been teaching for a while. I'm teaching at Western Colorado University right now, and I'll start at Oklahoma City University in January, mentoring. And so I have an interest in teaching a very small group, just because it's really hard to give a whole bunch of students, everything that they need. And grad school, it's an investment, it's an investment of so much time. And even now I'm like, I wish I could do more. I understand the poet Diana Coy Wynn, who says, she writes twice a year. She writes in like 15 days in the summer, 15 days, during winter break, because she obsesses over her students. And I get it, I get it. And I'm like, that is kind of what it takes, or that is what it takes. And my thing is like, give me 3 or 4 students and just let me,
Mm-hmm.
that's it. I'll be all right with that.
So what I was wondering is if you have any interest in pursuing academia, like having a full time, professorship somewhere. Is that something you'd like to do, or would you rather not?
I mean, I would like to be. I would be a trash man if the job was right. It's just like, how is it set up? Because academia looks different in so many different spaces.
Mm-hmm.
At Western Colorado University, the new director is just he's bringing the program back from the dead. Literally, he is, and he's allowing us to create our own classes, and we have almost complete creative freedom. And so that's a program where it's like, oh, I can design my own stuff. I don't have to adhere to what we think academia should be.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, I can do that. And so, yeah, if it's a job like that, definitely I'm interested. But if not, if it's just like you have to abide by these rules, that's a hard space for me. I went to a Montessori school, Tim. Like we like to float. We like to just move when we want to move. And so it's hard for me to, be
Yeah,
tamped
that's
out.
another thing I want to ask about was your drawing and graphic design. Do you use that in the service of poetry at all? Like, do you think about like graphic novels or graphic poetry or anything like that?
I'm thinking about Diana Corwin again and what she did with those photographs and Ghost of. I haven't done it to an extent like that. I mean, there are some poems where you can kind of see a little bit of the graphics coming out. You can see like my obsession over line length, and some you can see there's a poem that looks like railroad tracks to a board from abroad. There's a poem that looks like stairs. Steps to nowhere. And so you can see a little bit of that stuff. I love typography. But in terms of merging them both, I haven't found like that way to do it. There are some new poems that are doing something similar to that. But it's rare that they fuse. I think the last thing that I've done was, yeah, it was a newer poem, but like, yeah, they haven't made their way all the way in, and maybe they won't, because I am more interested in just what the words are doing than like how they're looking.
Yeah, well, it just seems like Tragic City could make a like a graphic novel type. I've seen a few books like that where it's poetry turned into like comic book form, so you get that wider audience too. And I was wondering if you'd ever thought of that. Like it seems like it's very. I mean, there's so much visual going on in these poems. It seems like it'd be a good fit almost.
This is new for me. Tim, you give me all kind of ideas. I'm about to go into academia on the strongest suit, and I'm about to. What I can say is the poem that I was most interested in, the poems were the refinery poems. Those were the poems I was most interested in, and they just look like blocks, right? They just look like buildings, but really, the refinery was the name of the building of the fellowship that I was in, and if you look at Google Maps, you'll see that's the exact shape of the building. And so looking at that and thinking about starting a poem the same way as you ended, and so that it's just like maze, but then it's like this is trapped. You're trapped inside of this space. That was more of like me thinking about the image and what the image can do with the words. But I don't know. You're giving me all kind of ideas, and I should have been taking notes for some of the earlier stuff. Is what I'll say.
Well, it'll all be on iTunes later or whatever.
Yep.
But the other thing you mentioned that you already had a book manuscript ready when you started when you moved to, I think you said when you moved to Tulsa or when you started this book at least. So do you have another manuscript and what's that about? If so?
Yeah, it was a normal like average like, hey, this is the first book about family and feelings. A very intimate book. I think one of the more recent books that did a good job at that in terms. It was like a father-son relationship type thing is Edgar Kuhn's book Tap Out. That book is doing it. But it was that type of book. It was that type of book. It was talking about masculinity and blah blah blah. And it was it was like I thought it was a good manuscript. My advisory board was like, yeah, send it out to all the big places, and it got shut down. It was just like nope, and which I'm grateful for. But I just been writing, so I don't start putting the book together until it's like I've written, and I know I've written 2 manuscripts now, so I need to eventually, once I revise all of that stuff, I'll go back in and see if I have something. But I also know there's a historical component I want for that first book that it wasn't there before, and so it won't be finished until I at least get into that. But yeah, it was.
So is there a theme that you're working on now? Like after Tragic City, is there something else that it's sort of you're obsessing with and thinking about a lot and writing about?
Yeah. 2 things I'll say. I found out that both of my great-grandfathers, 2 of my great-grandfathers they were longshoremen, in New Orleans, and so they were the guys taking all the shipment, the crates and stuff off of the ships before it was all automated. And so I was thinking around like, oh, what does that look like? Did they know each other? So I'm imagining a lot of stuff. So thinking about that, and also thinking about some of the, still like working through some of the trauma and that I, one went through, but also witnessed while I was in Tulsa, and this trying to get to a healthier, just a better version of myself. And so that's the hard part now, is that I'm used to writing a poem and being transformed by the poem. Mm-hmm. But now it's more so I have to transform myself and then write the poem. And so it's a harder book. It's a more intimate, mm-hmm. It's more intimate poems, but that's what I want to do. I want that intimacy, because Tragic City is, some of that's there, but it is more so, talking about an other. It's talking about, someone not me. Right. It's talking about a place that's not mine. And so my thing is, one of the books have to be me, yeah. The bulk of them at mm-hmm. least.
Would you say that growing up in New Orleans was something that's a big part of you? Because it's interesting that you grew up in New Orleans and in Louisiana in general, and then moved to Tulsa and wrote a book about Tulsa. Is there like a book about New Orleans? Is that something that was really formative for you? Between the food and the music, it already kind of sounds like it is.
Yeah. I mean, New Orleans is everywhere I go. Yeah, it's everywhere I go. What I can say is, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of poems about New Orleans. I'm constantly trying to claw my way back, mm-hmm. Like to my accent, which I've definitely lost some of, and I'm always trying to I'm not always, but I'm trying to get back to that space. I'm trying to get back to those spaces. I'm trying to get back, because even grad school and then writing this book, I separated myself from mm-hmm. friends, from family, from New Orleans. And so I am trying to get back now. And that's as far as I can go, because I lost my train of thought, Tim. So that's where we're at.
Well, that's right. We're just about out of time. So let's close out with one last poem anyway.
Okay. I guess as I'm in Tulsa, I'll do this. Since I passed it today, I passed up Oral Roberts University today. So Oral Roberts, the televangelist who actually started his, he started his time as a evangelist. He started that time in Tulsa, right outside of what was this place called Beano Hall, which was the Klan Hall in Tulsa before it was knocked down. He started his tent revivals right outside their doors.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So this is, go ahead.
What page is that, I was going to say?
This is page 33. Okay. All right. World's largest praying hands. And this is no punctuation, so I'm going to read it just like that. For God to hear your prayers, he needs to see your hands together like a mosquito's gazebo, carrying your blood like a message and massage after acupuncture to another mediator, buzzing in the ear of both pastor and El Pastor, who says he has seen the 640-foot Jesus, heard the word of the Lord before delivering what he scribbled and erased from the margins of the same verse everyone has heard before, while his wife sleeps, her hands clasped between her clasped thighs, because she hasn't been touched by oral ever, other than the tongue spoken by the ordained, the forehead nudge that sent her backward in convulsion of the pulpit in front of the whole congregation, busting the snake on the carpeted altar where the true believers shame the naysayers, catching the ghost, the most divine sign of the times, and tides the offering basket passed over by the pastor. 10% all the church and school needs, 10 persons to give whatever the pastor in training puts on your heart. A small tax for the absolution of your sins, for your single friends who found love in thy neighbor, sitting in the pew next to them, the iron gates ticking open once the code 5646316 is typed, and the reverend enters by his lonely, his rectangular spectacles readying the first sermon on the second Sunday at the third Pentecostal Methodist Methodical Methuselah Televangelist Church.
Great poem. Take a breath. There's World's Largest Praying Hands. Great poem. Great conversation. Thanks so much for being a guest today, Clem. It's been great talking to you, and a wonderful book. I hope everybody picks up a copy. Thanks for sharing it with us tonight.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate you.
Yeah, have a good night.
You too.
So that was Clemonce Heard, and his newest book is Tragic City, which I didn't put the. Let me put the cover on the screen here so you can see it. There it is. That's Tragic City, Clemonce Heard's newest book, and you can pick it up. It was the winner of the Anhinga Press Award, the Anhinga Robert Dana Prize for Poetry. And, oops, hang on a second. Okay, there it is. Yeah, Tragic City. And you can find more of Clem's work at his website, clemonceheard.com. That's ClemonceHeard.com. clemonceheard.com. So we're going to go to open lines now, and we'll be right back in just a moment. Now, how the open lines work, I'll tell you before we go. Email your poem to open mic, that's openmic at rattle.com. Just email it there so we have it and can show it on the screen like we were showing Clem's poems. And then call in, choose one or the other. You can either call in over Skype, and the Skype ID is Rattle Poetry, all one word. Just say hello on the chat message, and I'll call you back when it's your turn within about an hour. If you'd like to call by phone, the number is 818-850-7727. Just call, let it ring a few times, then hang up, and I will call you back when it's your turn. That's how you get on the call list. So I'm going to stand up and stretch, refresh my drink, get everything organized, and I will be right back in just a moment with tonight's open lines. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Now, I always have to log back into Open Mic. It signs me out once a week exactly during the show. But I logged back in. I remembered the password. So we're good to go there. Now, this week's prompt was our first repeat prompt that we've ever done. This prompt was to use randomstreetview.com. So randomstreetview.com is a site that randomly generates photographs of streets all over the world. The prompt was to find a photo that speaks to you and write a poem about it. That was your prompt for today, and this was my random street view. I didn't choose the first one. I chose like the fifth or seventh maybe one that I came across, and this was my my photo. And this is you can kind of see. Maybe I should have cropped it a little larger, but this car is wait here, maybe this helps. Yeah, there. That is in Seoul, South Korea somewhere, and a BMW here is trapped and can't get out. And here you go. So this is the poem that this Street View image from randomstreetview.com generated. Trapped in Seoul. After swearing, after squatting at the curb, into the nylon swish of your new blue tracksuit and measuring the millimeters in your mind, after standing and glaring into the glare of the windows of the restaurants across the street, at the wavy reflections of the cars in rows like teeth, after rocking in yours, forward and reverse, throwing the wheel clockwise, then counter like a sailor in a gale, like its sets of reps on the latest exercise machine, after the woman passing set her brown bag on the sidewalk and guided you with her hands, gentle gestures of her fingers like a magic spell of extraction, after kissing the minivan, the soft smear of your paint like lipstick on its bumper, after smiling at the woman, it's okay, but thanks, you finally found an empty bench in the shade of a tree, in a park you never noticed, and the book you've been meaning to read still there on your phone. You've given up on the day and your plans as they were, like the author has given up on this poem, and maybe it's better that way. So there is that is my poem, and you can see in the photo, I imagined that this guy is the driver. I'm not sure if it is, of course, but that was my what I was going with. And this is Megan's poem. Megan says, my poem is based on an unnamed road, County Westmeath, Ireland. And you have, this is Megan's screenshot of her random street view. You have an old rundown cottage, a stone, the roof falling apart, covered in weeds, for those listening. And this is Megan's poem, Unnamed House. Before the mouth that used to be a door exhaled trees, before the roof lost skin and muscle and became rib cage, someone made tea in what was a kitchen. Maybe one cup, steam rising like the memory of conversation, or maybe two faces at what was a window and is now only a socket without an eye. Someone held back the bushes that lean in like nosy neighbors, and someone else said thank you and kissed them. And nobody saw it, not even the gossiping weeds. Maybe whoever lived here died and was buried, and now they are doing what the dead do when nobody's looking. Here the earth is shameless, with a gall to boast about what it claims, and it swallows everything that remains, even the ghosts. So that was Megan's prompt poem. And once again, there's the photo of the cottage on Unnamed Road, County Westmeath, Ireland. So we'll see what you have. If you'd like to share anything, you can share poetry respond poems about current events. You can share prompt poems about randomstreetview.com. You can share recently published poems that you're proud of. So anything you'd like to share, feel free to share. And we have a couple. Let's see. What do we have? We have Carla Church. We actually don't have that many today. So I think we're going to say, to start with already, if you have two poems and you want to share, feel free. We have Richard Westheimer, Carla Schwartz. We have Philip Stern, Patrice Wilson, and Nivedita Karthik, who I think asked me to read. Then over on our inbox, we have a few. So I might end up reading more than we talk to people, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But let's call up, usually we end up calling Carla last. Let's call Carla Schwartz first this time.
Hi, let me just, I think I can just take these headphones off and I won't hear you. So
perfect. Yeah.
Now, can you hear me now?
I can. Yeah. Thanks.
Oh,
Thanks,
I
Carla.
do. Oh, there is feedback. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Hang on. We're gonna do that. Okay. I think we should be good now, right?
Okay. Yeah, we're good. So,
Yeah.
So what do you have to share with us today?
Okay. So I went to the random place and 13 Ferraro Street South, 2091, Johannesburg, South Africa. And did you, if you put up my poem, you can actually click that link and show it.
I do. Yeah. Here we have the poem right here,
Okay.
or the street view.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Right. The street view. And then so I put the address, and then the rest of the title is Serenity.
Ah.
And, okay, here we go.
Okay.
The garages we keep so clean, you can sit down on the floor. Never has a car rested there. Rather, our car, our plug-in, parks on the patio before the front door. Hence, the canopy, white as the brightest day, a large umbrella to shade house and car. Sometimes we sit out there in the shade, watching squirrels chase up the mango tree. Our gate, electronic, wired from beneath the clay bricks, set in a circle, our message to the sun. A mile away, dogs run wild around sheet metal shacks. A young boy starts a fire. Behind our doors, we fold our legs and ohm.
Oh, that's an interesting poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Carla. It's so that's the reason why it's so interesting to do these street view poems, is you end up imagining being there, And again, I'll show the picture on screen once again. This is the house we're talking about. But it's so fascinating to think about that's an actual house that somebody lives in and has no idea that you wrote a poem about their house this week.
I know. I know. And that carport umbrella thing, I actually went through the neighborhood, on the Google thing, and saw that many of the houses in this particular street have this carport kind of thing. Most of them didn't have their umbrella up, that there was a frame. It looked like every house had this brick wall and then the frame, and then you could get into it.
That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, it's pretty, low latitude, or I guess you'd say high southern latitude. So I don't know about the sun. Like, we have a lot of those here because we're 1,000 feet up and pretty far south. So the sun is brutal. And so maybe it's bad there too. And that's what it's for. But that's cool to see. It's
right.
always, I just love the street views and seeing, what the world is like. So many, I think I went through 7 or so at first because so many of them are just like woods or like a grass field, Right.
I had that experience as well. And some things speak to you and some don't, I actually went to a Korean restaurant tonight called Soul Kitchen, by the way. And so your Korean soul scene really spoke to me as well. That was very cool.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing and writing that, Carla.
Thank you. Take care. Good night.
You too. Good night. Now let's go to Richard Westheimer, another poet that we tend to put toward the back of the show the last couple times. Hey, Richard, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Tim, I'm doing great. That was quick. There wasn't 30 seconds. I got to hear the end of Carla's call.
Oh, really? Yeah, maybe are you watching on Facebook or YouTube?
YouTube.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder which. I don't know which has better delay or not. I don't know. Or maybe someone upgraded something, who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. Terrific interview tonight.
I've been looking forward to this one for a while because Clem, that poem we published of his in the summer, 99, was so good. And then we published 2 Poet Respond poems too. So that's good stuff. And I was looking forward to this book. So it's fun to share and talk to him. What do you want to share?
So do we have time for 2?
Yeah, we do. There aren't that many people asking on right now. So yeah.
Well, I'll do my Poets Respond poem first, which was I Try a White Nationalist. Would be unsubmittable. Okay.
Yeah. Let me pull that up. And so while I do that, what was it about? Like, do you want to explain the context?
Yes. So there's a civil trial going on in Charlottesville right now where a class of, I think, 19 injured people are suing the organizers of the Unite the Right. I forget what the name of the, the white supremacist rally in Charlottesville that was so brutal and injured so many people and it turns out, was very well organized amongst a number of luminaries of the white supremacist community.
Yeah, Richard Spencer.
Yeah.
He's part of it.
He's one of those, and I've sort of shielded myself from too much of it. I mean, there's just so much to take in. But I did read an article about some of the testimony, which is mostly, as the judge said, this is not a podcast. This is testimony because these people were, articulating their hatred, and so I was just imagining what I would do if I were the prosecuting attorney.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's hear it. I try a white nationalist.
If I could cross-examine a white nationalist after he'd proclaimed the greatness of his race, after he'd maintained his hate, after he'd pointed at me and preened himself with chants of, "You will not replace us. You will not replace us," I'd ask him about his day, about the mud stuck to his shoe, whether he walked yesterday as I had among the leaves cascaded by that first fall freeze, about how the sun had dappled him through the branches, had made his eyes dance, uncreased his crow's feet, and loosened his brow. I'd solicit his testimony about the sight of his shadow, long and graceful as the low-slung sun followed him from the woods. I would not object on the grounds of hearsay as he spoke of what the breezes whispered to him through the trees, nor would I move to strike when he lowered his voice to tell of the moments after dark fell, when he felt so alone and cried as I might have on just such a night. I'd let him be for just a moment, buried in his fears, until the judge banged his gavel and told the jury to disregard my line of questioning, whereupon I'd respond, Your Honor, these questions go to state of mind. I'm trying to find why this man marched armed with his AK, brandished his battle flag, bloodied his car on soft bodies, and lit his torch among a storm of 1,000 others, khaki-clad, just like him, and why his face twisted sharp, hardened by the flames, and what happened to him in the shadows that night after the sun had settled behind him, what made him try to drive that darkness away by setting the world ablaze. I turned to the defendant, now coiled fetal, or was he cocked tight, an unsprung trap ready to snap, or smoldering wildfire primed to ignite?
Yeah, excellent poem, and really, really well read too, Richard. You're always a great reader, but the monologue style really brings that out too. And I've been thinking about that a lot since the Ernie, on last week's episode was talking about his style, and how I read too fast. It was really great, great pacing in your performance of that.
I appreciate. I've been thinking a lot about poets being a poet and loving one's words, owning them,
mm-hmm.
and I think Clemonce talked about it, reading it until he loved it, and that's sort of what I've been working on as I've been writing the last couple of weeks, is just like reading them as though I own them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and why, if you're, why share something if you're not owning it? There's something to that too.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the street view prompt.
Yeah, the street view was on this island south of the Hebrides, but sort of like the northernmost tip of the northernmost islands of England. And I don't know if I posted the picture at the top of my.
Yeah, I have it up for everybody.
Right, but these low slung buildings and I don't know, but it immediately went to this poem. 23 weeks. I've run this road 100 times, seen the low-slung shed, its red doors slid shut against the winds out here. Today, it lay open and beckoned me, insisted I look inside only to find you, 1,000 times smaller than I imagined you to be. You covered in fine silky hair, and I could not bear to know if this was a womb or a tomb that I peered into, only that it was so dark, so hard to see what I was seeing, so frightening to know that your limbs, frog legs splayed, were too small for your head, too fragile to touch, too much for me to carry home and back here every day. So I moved away, sat on the cold, hard ground, sobbed to a God who could not respond, and considered if I should wait for you here just in case, or slide the red door shut.
Oh, wow. That's some poem there, Richard. 23 weeks. Really imagine the emotion of that scene from the street view. Yeah. Good stuff.
Well, we have a young friend who had a miscarriage at 22 weeks and just bore a child who
really
have hopes for at 23 weeks.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Just a beautiful poem, and the emotion was all there. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Tim. Talk to you soon.
Yep. Bye. That was Richard Westheimer, and 23 Weeks was the poem. And now let's go to Patrice Wilson. Hey, Patrice, how you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you. So what do you have that you'd like to share?
I'd like to share the two short poems about the what is it, A Street?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me find them. Here we go. Okay. So we have so here's the street view, and this is Adirondack Northway,
Right.
Lewis, New York, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me put it on the screen. This is the street view that Patrice is working with.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
I just want to say, when I saw that, I grew very quiet inside and in my mind, because it drew back memories of trips that my family used to take on the road from New Jersey to upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
So I got very quiet, and then all these other associations came forth.
Yeah, it's interesting you said, because that's where I grew up in upstate New York too, and it comes back like that. I don't know, the landscape is very iconic of that area. It really is.
It is, yeah. So, this first one is called Journey. Journey. Between two well-hewn walls of mountain rock, a parted Red Sea miracle of our own making, I travel north from New Jersey, signs indicating alpine scenic lookouts, the word Alp, meaning a high mountain in English, in another tongue, brave, valiant. Ahead, a view of distant higher peaks, mottled with strong autumn colors. But I seek valleys more than hills, a cleft in between where I long to live, a land flowing with milk and honey, a fresh water river to fish and swim in, a green and thoroughly quiet promised land. It will take a long time.
And that was Journey, the first poem, and I love that ending. It will take a long time. Great turn there. And the other one's about the same photo.
Same photo, yes. And this kind of scared me when I was very young, and we were going through these walls of rock. Remembering a mountain road sign, one car, one two-lane highway built through blasted stone. Beware of falling rock.
Yeah, that's funny too, because we live up in the mountains, and so we have those signs and falling rocks all over the place. And I used to be scared of them too, and now it's just second nature driving past them, because you couldn't get out otherwise. But yeah, those are great poems. Thanks for sharing both, Patrice.
Thank you. I enjoy these Rattlecasts so much.
Yeah, well, we enjoy you too. I'm so glad you could share some poems. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Patrice Wilson with two based on an Adirondack Road photograph. And let's see. So someone else called. Nylema just called. So we'll add Nylema to the list. Let's go to Philip Stern next, and then I'll see. We'll see.
Hello.
Hey, Philip, how you doing tonight? I think I hear myself in the background, so mute. Yeah. That's perfect, thanks. So what would you like to share tonight, Philip?
Okay, this is a poet's respond, and the poem was on my burner for a long time, but I couldn't come up with a proper ending till I thought about it again. I trotted it out with this beginning of this Ahmaud Arbery case, the three men pursuing and killing that jogger. I've been having a little second thoughts now, because so much good stuff. I mean,
well, your stuff is great too, Philip. So don't worry about that.
Yeah. Anyway, moral history. I just don't want it to be a political diatribe in terms of what's been said, and it's much more abstract than the personal stuff we've been hearing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the poem is called Moral History, and of course it connects the history of the world with individual histories, which you have to with morals. And I use the word binary in a mathematical sense: yes, no, on, off, 1, 0.
Mm-hmm.
And this is contrasted with binocular eyesight, which is three-dimensional. Okay, moral history. Infants learn there's I and not I. Everyone starts with binary eyes. Children are taught to socialize, to share, and temper their binary eyes. But if self be 1 and others be 0, elders will listen to demagogue hero shouting us, not them, hypnotized by primary binary eyes, forgetting too soon the source of Earth's wounds, how pyramids, plantations, ovens arise, how ghosts in white hoods were deaf to men's cries through cutout holes, burned binary eyes. A mind can combine right and left eye to see a whole human, not a half lie. No one to hate, no one to blame, when other is equal and different are same.
That's a very good poem. Thanks so much for sharing that. The Moral History by Philip Stern. I love the form and the wordplay, as always, and the rhymes work really well. The ovens arise is an especially great line when the rhyme from eyes comes through there. Good stuff, Philip. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you for your comments. Yes. And as always, for allowing me to share.
Yeah, always my pleasure. I just love the open lines, and I'm glad you can call in frequently. Thanks a lot, Philip.
You're welcome. Bye.
Good night. Yeah, that was Philip Stern with Moral History, responding to the Ahmaud Arbery trial beginning this week with only one black juror. Let's see who. Oh, yeah, Nylema just called. Nylema Kirkanis. Let's give her a call. Hey, Nylema, this is Tim with Rattle. You're live on the air. How you doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's been a great night of poetry so far. What do you have to share with us?
Okay, so I have a poem that's going to be published soon.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. In the archives. It's called Archives. It's and through the historic Joy Kogawa House. It's one of a few poems, and it's called Photophobia. And it's about photophobia.
And so photophobia, yeah, would that be fear of pictures, or is that something different?
No, it's not a phobia. It's an actual injury to the eyes, but it shares the name phobia. So I always find that really interesting, that it's an inflammatory condition where your eyes, like your retina, is quite burned. And it's very painful physically. But but it's interesting that it has that name, you know?
Yeah.
And it just means your eyes are repelled by the light. So it's not the fear, it's the repellent aspect.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this is an excerpt of a longer poem?
Yes, a much longer poem.
Interesting.
This is the first part.
How long is it?
Sorry?
How long is the poem?
It's like 1,000. The whole poem is 1,000 words. I'm not sure how many words this is, but it's not. It's like maybe 200, I think. Not even.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested in hearing this, and congratulations on having a home for it. But let's go ahead. I'll put it up and then go ahead and read it.
Thank you. Okay. Shall I go?
Yeah, go ahead. It's up online for everybody, but you have to read your own copy.
Yes. Photophobia. Falling sunsets, dipping themselves along the frosted edges of our sharpened hearts. Pens strewn upon the table, you encouraged us to draw. Ka excrete, you and me, pithy android fantasies. We named robots in newly invented words, only whisper to ourselves over morning cups of deepening brown tea with milk and buttery toast. Teapot reflections off of assuming walls, holding sunsets as their only truths. Cycling our horizontal imperfections, dancing leaves of light between us. Whistleblower, letters and files. I closed my burning eyes, seeing clearly through compelling darkness. Astigmatic, utopia, myopic, shaping sorrow, out of felt-tip nibs of black pens found anywhere, or at the pharmacy, or at the variety store, or at the debonair. Now, I am the life you can't quite believe in. Now, I laugh at myself as I furrow my brow, tempting my own expectations of what we dreamed for. I don't forget the multiform we constructed out of bricolage, our bodies pleading with us, cells taking, transformation, transmutation, transition, forth and back, provisional. Daily provisions paid for at a register of falsely construed sins. Synergy of an apocalyptic antonym, since Genesis only theorizes the beginning, which will be as difficult and as simple to predict as the ending. Cat's tail looping around spherical timings, peripheral vision, holographic lenses, round, stylish sunglasses to bend Solaris with. At eye blink, lashes beating in temporal meters, renewing spectrum. Perhaps the days behind cool, dewy, pretending windows were boring with you, although I never saw it that way. That way, I thought we were enigmatic.
Oh, that was very interesting. Thanks so much for sharing that. And that's going to be published in Archive. Can you tell us anything about that? Because I'm not familiar with it. So let's see.
Yeah, sure. So look, I'm in Montreal, and the historic Joy Kogawa house is the childhood house of Joy Kogawa, who's a very well-known writer of Japanese descent here. And she wrote the book Obasan. And so they teamed up with the Archives, which is a queer archive. And they're going to publish our poetry in tandem as part of a Queer Asian workshop series that we did through the summer, where we were taught and mentored by a bunch of wonderful writers here in this country. Yeah. So I'm excited.
Oh, that's really
pretty
cool.
Exciting.
Yeah. And I'm showing some on screen, some of these. This is the house for people to see. Yeah, this is really cool.
They have literary Yeah, it's really rad. They have like literary residencies there, and like it's all mostly contemporary literature. And Joy Kogawa herself is like an amazing like figure in literature, and she's a beautiful poet as well as fiction writer.
Well, that's really cool. I have to look more into this after the show. Thanks for sharing that. It's great.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it again.
Yeah, have a great night.
You too. Thanks.
Bye. Okay, so let me make sure. I think we, that might be, Mike Bales too. Sorry, Mike. Let's call it Mike Bales. I want to make sure I don't miss any people who wanted to call in. And I have a few poems from people who just wanted me to read them, so we'll do that too. But let's call it Mike.
Jim, how's it going?
Great. How you doing, Mike?
Pretty good. This is one of the days where I've had 2 readings.
So this
There's
is
something for the Iowa City poets, which is fun.
Was that a live event,
I'm
or was that
tonight.
Zooming too?
Is Zoom. I can actually do some live readings, like a thing called Roaring Rhetoric. It's mostly performance poets, but I'm friends with the host, so he's there. He's very gracious. guy named Aubrey Ryan, who actually probably makes money teaching poetry.
Uh-huh.
Then yesterday at a writers groups. Sometimes these days are busy, exciting, where I'm busy with my writing, doing different readings and that.
Yeah,
sometimes it almost feels like I don't have any eat.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm glad you could find the time to join us, Mike. So what do you want to share today?
I wrote a poem off the Street View. Tried to copy it, but I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
It's some kind of little line of trees and some rural city near Budapest kind of fields.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually reminded me of the times I, as a flagger, worked in the northern part of Wisconsin along the woods, and felt the trees kind of talk to me. So this is a pantoum. It's called A Soft Awakening.
Oh, very cool. Let's hear it.
A veil of trees rises in remnant country land to the touch of a morning sun. In the winds, a ballad or song. In remnant country land, a dream is awakened. In the winds, a ballad or song. The moon dying 1,000 times. A dream is awakened. As I walk day after day, I notice the moon dying 1,000 times. A cloud of celestial dust. As I walk day after day, I notice a field waiting to take seed. A cloud of celestial dust. The earth dances with the sun and moon. A field waiting to take seed reaches for the breadth of skies, where the earth dances with the sun and moon. A veil of tree rises.
Oh, that's a very cool poem. I love the use of the repetition there. It's really good, especially the when it weaves in through like that. It's really great use of the pantoum. Thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Thanks. I've won some contests actually using the pantoum form. It's nice to visit forums every now and then.
It is, yeah. Our Rattle Poetry Prize winner last year was that pantoum, and it's not a form that we see a lot in submissions, but it's really fun when we get them. So thanks for sharing that.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Yep.
All right,
have a good night. Bye. It was Mike Bales with A Soft Awakening, and let me just remind you, in case anybody's waiting for the last chance to call in, the phone number is 818-850-7727, 818-850-7727. Just let it ring a few times, then hang up. I will call you back. Or you could use Skype to Rattle Poetry, all one word. Just send me a chat message and say hi. And email your poem, too, to openmic@rattle.com if you haven't yet. Some people sent poems that can't read and share them today. So let's take a look at this. This is Nivedita Karthik's prompt-based poem. And we have a picture from Nivi here. Let me see if I can zoom in enough that we can get a good view of the picture. This is Nivi's poem. And the location is Vigvagen, Denmark. And it's a photo of trees with a sun. It's really actually a beautiful photograph for Street View. That Google car outdid itself this time. And this is Nivedita's poem, Komorebi, I think you'd say. Shadows dance on the ground as sunlight filters through the trees, Komorebi. Light filters through minute spaces to reach dark places, Komorebi. Shrouded by canopies of misery, little streaks of light filter through, Komorebi of joy. And there is that. And here, down at the bottom, I didn't see it before. Komorebi is a Japanese expression used to indicate sunlight filtering through the trees. Very cool. So I learned a new word today, and that is like my favorite thing. Like up here, I can't turn on the nature cam right now because it's dark out. But when it's the sunset, one of the reasons why I always have trouble with my lighting is I love the windows that are right in front of my computer here. I'm right behind you. I'm like talking to you, and the light comes in the evening through all the pine trees. It's just my favorite thing. So it's the Komorebi that I love. That's so cool. Thanks for sharing that, Nivedita. Once again, it was Nivedita Karthik with Komorebi, and then her other poem for the Poet Respond was about this article. And I'm not going to play the video because we learned that there are now people like copyright hunting videos. So I won't play it, but I'll read the headline here. And this is the poem. Oh no, don't play. Okay. So this is the headline. Meet Chowder and Maddie, skateboarding bulldogs who can't get enough of their wheels. And this is from mirror.co.uk. And Chowder, and I think what it is, to talk about this copyright thing, I think people are taking TikTok videos, and this is a TikTok video, and they are offering to buy them, and then they are using copyright claims to make money. So it's like a business model I've just noticed that came out. And so I think this probably was sold, someone bought it and then sold to the Mirror and things like that. Anyway, so Chowder has been a massive hit on TikTok thanks to his skateboarding skills, and was sent some new gear to try out. And they won't even let me show a preview. Oh, here's a picture. So there's the dog. He's getting his new skateboard. It's a bulldog. And there he is on his skateboard. The 35-inch board is now Chowder's favorite one, and Dad's too. So it's Chowder the skateboarding bulldog is Nivi's poem, or Nivi's topic, and this is Nivi's poem, Chowder Charlie. Here we go. Chowder Charlie. Are you asking me who I am? Me? Well, let me tell you right away, ma'am. I am what you call a star, you see. I am a star on social media, for I am an influencer beyond compare. Just search the term in the encyclopedia, and you'll see my photo below the word. It's right there. This is because of one little thing that makes me go wee, and that's my gift my dad gave me, you see. A new 35-inch skateboard, oh so gently, helping me become the new skateboarding champ, Chowder Charlie. And there's Nivedita Karthik's poem, Chowder Charlie, another fun one. Always fun to see fun news stories for a change. Thanks as always, Nivi. Let me see. I'm going to see, we'll see if we can call up Anita Larrick. So Anita mentioned, there she is. Let's see.
Hello.
Hey, Anita, how you doing? It's great to see you.
The magic of all these vehicles. I'm just following the wave.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad. I think if you want to appear on video, you just have to push your camera button, which is that little icon between the red hang up and the white mute. There's a little camera box.
Yes.
Okay.
But it looks like,
There you go.
Wow.
Okay, let me just resize you. You have a good size setup there. A lot of bandwidth.
Is that right?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so it's great to see you. So where are you calling from?
Thank
I don't know if have you been on before on the phone?
I'm also from Canada.
Ah, okay.
And I grew up in Montreal, but I've been living in Toronto for an awfully long time, and I know all about these dépanneurs.
Oh, that's great.
They're the lifeblood of society. You can get everything at a dépanneur.
That's great. I didn't know that.
Everything.
So what did you want to share with us?
Well, today I'd like to do the poet response poem, please. Mm-hmm. And it's the one entitled "Sleeping with Waves."
Okay, I have it. Yep.
And it's based. Yeah. And it's basically. Sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say, set it up for us so we know what it's about. But you were about to do it anyway, so I'm just cutting you off. I'm trying not to.
No problem. It's kind of indirectly influenced by the recent, environmental international affair, the COP26. And in my interest, I'm very strong on identity issues, and I've tried to weave personal identity with environmental identity. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how I've succeeded, but it's like a first try. I've broken out of the box of just identity. It's a wider thing. It's not a binary thing. Sleeping with waves. If you have not saved your work in the computer's memory, all is lost. A lifetime asks the question, are you saved? And this is my epigraph from a book entitled Aging to Saging, a very wise book by a rabbi and a New Age elder by the name of Zalman Schachter Shalomi. In fish time I rest between stretches of pain, eyes open, stomach filled with wastewater, wipes, plastic fibers, failures, 3 a.m., undigestible. At first the flutters, unmarked words, pushed down. I lie still. My belly is a map of twisting biography. station to station, abandoned. Names pounding, just out of reach. Where am I? Gut splits open to flashes of heroism. My ambition printed on skyscraper waves, defying the gods of wind and blood to stay up. I was a child of poisoned flowers that lay in deep places. I dove down, returned with wounded stones from that hole for souls, overturned by life, screaming darkly in the wreckage. Sorrow of the fall, sorrow of the rise. I clutched the stones through gales, through monster lips exploding into frailty. No turning back, losing strength. I, not I, lie labeled, unnamed, despised, swallowed. My sea family beats inside me, a sickness or something else, held together by the prayer of stones. I read the waves, try to save the evidence. This is why I am still here. I diarize the odors in dying air, the unflowering of plants, my debilitation. Beat of the hurt, beat of the healing. My mind travels, harvesting the night.
Oh, that was excellent. So many great lines in that one, Anita. That was Sleeping with Waves. Thanks so much for sharing that.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I'm glad we could get you on live. It's great to see you.
Yeah, you've heard my voice. You've never seen me.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So hope to see you again soon. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's Anita Lyric, once again with Sleeping with Waves. And let me see who else wanted to share a poem. There's some more people. Let's see. So Jason Lofters. I'm not sure. See, I'm just nervous about playing video because if it's on YouTube somewhere else, yeah, I want to get a copyright strike. Let's see. Can we play this? Oh, we can't. I can't play it anyway. I'll try to figure out this. Jason Lofters sent one a few days ago, and I didn't see it until just now. I'm going to star it and try to figure out how to play it for you guys next week. So here is Sharon Ferrante with her Street View poem. And this is a haiku that Sharon wrote. This is the photograph, the Street View photo that she found right here. And you see it's a small house. It says "Welcome to the lake." So it looks like a little lake house. There's a little fence and a little bucket and some stuff growing around it. So it's a very small little lake house here. And the haiku: I visit the lake, finding debris everywhere. I empty my mind. Sharon Ferrante. So that was the haiku. I visit the lake, finding debris everywhere. I empty my mind. Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Sharon. And let's see. Lauren Dia has one too. This is Anybody Arbitrarily. Click on any random street, find any random life, and see how we all not so secretly strive, seeking a single collective conformity, but it's all the same. Will you just run away with me? Don't have to run at all. We can go anywhere without leaving any living room. Let's take it all, keep it all in the palm of your hand. Don't like your place in the society, this Google Earth? Click on any screen, create and be whomever you seem. Silicone sim piles of simulations, stacked, cracked mosaic of Mother Earth. Where? It doesn't matter. We collect our would-be lives, living in these boxes, encased in bricks and mortar, imprisoned in pixels of perfect lies, randomly refracted the view of any street. And that is Anybody Arbitrarily. Very interesting poem. Thanks for sharing that. It was Lauren Dia. Ted Guevara has one too. This is Ted's Random Street View. Oh, look at this. I could not copy and paste the original shot, but I enclose a pic that comes close. On the original, there's a van parked at the side with all these houses with satellite discs. There are profanities in this poem, but they are in Portuguese. Well, thanks for warning us there, Ted. And this is the poem that's similar, or the picture that's similar to Ted's street view. I'll put this on screen. So this photo with 1,000, well, maybe not 1,000, 100 maybe, satellite dishes on all the roofs. Looks like, I don't know, I'd say somewhere in the Middle East. And here is Ted's poem. Street name, Estra, I guess it would probably be Portugal then. Maybe not, I don't know. Street name, Estra de Mata. Family genes and rivalry are still connected by disc. The man in the van is talking to his wife about tungsten, strong metal, ideal for the physicality of crypto coins, as if the world would still depend on hands-on exchange tomorrow. It's been their talk at the table lately. Their 3 kids would surely benefit. Now the man is wondering if they're having piri-piri chicken tonight. He's also wondering if her Professor Pi is well enough to drive. She tells him Lisbon is 100 kilometers away, and adds, "Don't start." Yeah, he doubts. The old man-in-law is known for surprises. He can show up proud at the doorstep any time. His jeans are old hat, but they're not kaput and buried. Tungsten would be ideal during his time, Napoleon's time. The man puts his DirecTV van in reverse and still wonders if he should risk going home. His appetite for chicken might spoil, let alone his sex drive for his wife. Bloody hell mine, the old man could put his mind to shame. No doubt that Mijo de Formiga, fodder, knows crypto by now. Interesting poem. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. And I was wondering, I saw the story this week or last week maybe about the tungsten, the solid tungsten balls that are now being traded and sold, and the company that makes them is going out of stock by people who have tons of money to burn just because they're becoming crypto millionaires. And it's so interesting that it's the weight of it, because tungsten is like one of the heaviest things you can have, the most dense. And so a little ball feels much heavier than your mind thinks. And there's something about like the weight of that contrasting with the ephemeral nature of the cryptocurrency. Sort of sings or screams out to be written, have poems written about it. So thanks for doing us one there, Ted. It's Ted Guevara with street name Estra de Meta. And here's Vicky Miko's. Vicky Miko's. I'm not sure if this is a tanka or not, but let's see. And this is her street view. This looks like, let me see. This looks like Tolima, Colombia. And is that a river or a road? It's hard to tell. I think that's a river. So it's a river, a nature kind of scene on this street view. And here is Vicky's poem, My First Time. My first time trespassing on the Mississippi riverbank, our indulgence lasting beyond the mosquitoes. Oh, that's great. I love the last couplet there, our indulgence lasting beyond the mosquitoes. That's great. And that was Vicky Miko's poem for prompt number 117. Okay, I think that is everybody. Oh, wait, Susan Talley. Let's see, how much time do I have? Yeah, well, let's read these last 2 poems, too. This is Autumn by Susan Talley, who I guess can't call in. She often does. Oops. Here we go. Autumn. Autumn, sweep summer, that old postcard, into piled leaves, russet and brisk. No longer green, languid, we fall in step, crunching, back to yearly routines. That's our autumn poem for the autumn prompt. I think we had an autumn prompt a few weeks ago, an ode to autumn. Thanks so much for sharing that, Susan. Susan Talley's poem for autumn. And I think one last one. I believe, one last poem. This is Colette O'Donoghue. Might you read this? Oh, no, not Colette. It's Peter, the Badger O'Donoghue, using Colette's email address. Hey, Tim, might you read this? Thank you. And this is Sepulcher. And here's the photo that this poem is about. This is an interesting industrial, some kind of old factory of some kind, in a great lighting, too. If this is a street view, it's another really good photograph, very artistic. That Google camera is quite the artist. Maybe it's getting intelligent over the years. I don't know. But excellent photograph. And here is Peter's poem. Let me just paste it here 1 second. I'll just play it here. Okay. Here's Peter's poem. Sepulcher. That's one of those words I don't know if I'm saying right. I've seen it over and over again, especially in like Anne Rice novels and things, but I never know how to say it. I don't know if I've ever heard it read out loud. Sepulcher. Too big for that, though you held my dread, thoughts and dreams, my loved. They nibble away at you now, like yellow rats, these hydraulic, beak-toothed modern-day dinosaurs, hungry for change, even in this forsaken, starved place. You were sanctuary? Hardly. Cathedral? Definitely. A place I could worship, of decay, dissonance, dystopian reverence. Beauty, like hate, is in the heart of the beholder. Your nighttime silhouette haunted me daily with impecunious desire. I wish I had gone first, though. I wish I didn't have to witness your literal downfall, to bear witness to that almost bestial screech you gave as another steel girder gave way. There is something, too, of the Scooby-Doo about you, a childish, nightmarish rhyme of an edifice, an artificial blast from the past I never had. Spooky, baby. You were spooky, and I loved you. Oh, that is a cool poem, too. And I don't know, now I'm not sure if that was last week's spooky prompt, or if that was a Street View, or if it's both combined. But I love it. I love that there's something, too of the Scooby-Doo about you. It's a very fun poem, and then creepy, too. Thanks for sharing that, Peter. Now, I think that's going to be it. So, let me do our Sciku for the week really quick, and then we will tell you about next week's prompt. So the Sciku for this week is based on this article. This is from Johns Hopkins University. And if you have arachnophobia, speaking of phobias, don't look at the screen right now, because this is a huge spider. The spider's web-making secrets unraveled is the article. And researchers at Johns Hopkins University discovered precisely how spiders build webs by using night vision and artificial intelligence to track and record every movement of all 8 legs as the spiders work in the dark. And what they did, and you can watch some video here, which again I won't play, but it's interesting if you want to find this, is they hooked up this infrared lights and recorded the spiders over and over again every night. And the interesting thing that they found is that it was predictable, the movements between different spiders and different species of spiders, so that they knew that it's a program that they're running, that they evolved to operate this program or to execute, I guess you could say. And so they could predict where in the spider's web was made just based on how the legs were moving at that time. And it just made me think about algorithms and how complicated the world is, and how we're really kind of algorithms moving around ourselves. That's what nature is. That's what we all are. We run these programs in our minds that give us certain reactions to things. And so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the metaverse, and that we've been talking about the last few weeks. And I came up with this Sciku, and I added a photograph too from Unsplash. I can't remember who the photographer was, but it's a free stock photo website, Unsplash. So I grabbed a photo here, and this is my Sciku for this week. At the center of the algorithm, an orb weaver waits. At the center of an algorithm, an orb weaver waits. That is our Sciku for today, and that is the show for today. Now, next week's prompt is going to be write an apology poem. It's a pretty easy one. Write a poem. That's an apology. You decide what you want to apologize for, or apologize on behalf of someone else. Whatever you'd like to do, write a poem that is an apology. And that is your prompt for this week. It's been a great show. Thanks, as always, for joining me. Next week's guest is going to be Ananda Lima and her newest book, Motherland. Or I think it's her first book, maybe. But Ananda was in Rattle number 57 and happened to be in LA, so she came out to our poetry reading and featured there maybe, around, 3 years ago. And just a wonderful poet and a wonderful person. She's one of those people that just made me feel good about life after having seen her poetry reading. And hopefully I'm looking forward to this book. I'm sure it's going to be very similar. Ananda Lima, that's Rattlecast number 118. The prompt is to write an apology poem, and looking forward to this. So I hope to see you then. Hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you soon. Good night.